endless test runs on the racetrack and road tests under extreme condition give AMG engineers the proof. This is an engine whose reliability and performance are second to none.
Well, I might give you performance, but reliability is second to none. Are you kidding me? I'm definitely going to have to disagree with you, AMG. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Legit Street Cars. My name is Alex, and in today's factory defect video, I'm going to lay it out for you. I'm going to tell you the truth about what I believe to be the least reliable AMG engine ever built, the M156 6.3-liter V8. And if you thought that I was a die-hard Mercedes fanboy up until this point, this video may change your mind a little bit. Now, this video is going to be jam-packed with knowledge and information that can help you avoid buying a total nightmare or help you negotiate an awesome deal on an M156 equipped vehicle like I just did. So if your engine looks like this, you're definitely going to want to stick around because I'm going to point out all of its major flaws and defects. And no, I did not just buy this SL63, but I think you guys are going to really like the car that I just bought. It's an amazing story, cheapest in the country type of deal. And because of what I've learned, because of my knowledge, I was able to save a lot of money on buying this car. So as they say, knowledge is power, and if you guys are into learning as much as I am, then you're going to love today's video sponsor, Skillshare.com. Skillshare.com is an online learning community with more than 25,000 classes in design, business, and just about anything else you could think of. Right now I'm taking an awesome class on guitar for beginners, and even though I speak Italian, this Italian course looks awesome. I value good information that's presented professionally, and that's exactly what I find on Skillshare. After these classes, I'm diving right into a class on diesel engines because you all know how much I love my old Mercedes diesel. The best part is Skillshare is super affordable with annual subscriptions starting at less than $10 a month, and a premium subscription gets you unlimited access to take as many classes as you'd like. There are over 7 million people learning on Skillshare today, and you can be one of them for free by being one of the first 500 of my subscribers to click on the link in the video description box down below. This will get you 2 months of premium access at no cost to you. Guys, this is an amazing deal. Hurry up, click on the link down below. You have absolutely nothing to lose and everything to gain. Big thanks to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Now let's get to our first really expensive issue with this engine. Our first factory defect is really a shame because this wasn't some new AMG technology or anything overly complicated. This is the type of issue that would have you saying,
"Come on now, dawg. Come on, man."
And of course, we're talking about the cylinder head bolts. Every engine has head bolts, but in the case of the M156, they would break. Here are some old style M156 head bolts. You can see the upper shoulder of the center bolt has worn down considerably and they all look corroded. One issue with these bolts was coolant would cause corrosion and the bolts would erode away. This severely weakened the torque to yield bolts and the heads would snap right off. These bolts also originally used a Torx head, so the material at the head of the bolt is reduced, making it weaker. The head bolts were revised by Mercedes, but it took about 4 years for them to implement the changes at the factory. This shows the old versus the new, and as you can see, the revised bolt on the right has more material up top, making it stronger, and the new bolts didn't corrode like the old ones did either. Your first indication that you have a broken bolt or two is a low coolant light. Basically, you'll have an uneven torque of the cylinder head. This will allow coolant to seep past the head gasket and into the combustion chamber. You'll also get a misfire because you're now burning this coolant. If you let this go, eventually you could have a hydrolock situation. So this is a very serious issue and it affected a lot of these engines. Now, there is some good news in all of this. Well, sort of. It's kind of a silver lining, I guess. But like I said, Mercedes-Benz and AMG did update these head bolts at the factory eventually, and after that update, we don't see any more broken head bolts. So it seems like they really did fix this problem. Now, what's awesome is that you guys can tell if the engine engine in your car or one you want to buy is affected by the faulty head bolts by looking at the engine serial number. There is a certain break point where they started implementing the new head bolts, so if your serial number is past that, then you're good to go. So I'm going to leave a factory Mercedes-Benz bulletin linked down below with some very easy to follow instructions on how you can tell what your engine serial number is and whether or not you have the really bad head bolts or the new updated awesome head bolts. Our next major engine issue is not directly related to the head bolts, and yes, I'm going to be filming from basically every angle of the SL63 because I don't know where else to stand and talk to you guys. So our next issue isn't directly related to the head bolts, but if your head bolts were being replaced by Mercedes-Benz under warranty, they're going to replace these parts as well because, like the head bolts, they knew that these parts were going to be problematic too. We're talking about the lifters, and I'm going to start off by saying if you guys do your research online, you're going to see these referred to as many different things. They're going to call them tappets and buckets and lifters and probably a couple other things. Everybody's referring to the same parts. I refer to it as a lifter. It sits right underneath the cam lobe, and its job is to open up the valve. There's a spring that sits inside of it from the bottom. So the lifters had issues on the 156 engine. Normally these are supposed to spin when the engine is running, but sometimes they would seize, and when that happened, the cam lobe would only contact one portion of the lifter and wear it out. And because the cams had their own issues by themselves, which we're going to get to in a minute, it would wear the cam lobe out too. This is what the top of a seized lifter looks like. As you can tell, the cam lobe was only contacting one portion of the lifter and it wore it out. Now this is what the cam can look like after a lifter gets stuck in the head. If you have a lifter like this, you're going to hear a ticking noise, and it may be loudest at cold start. And if it gets really bad, the engine will start to misfire. This is what a normal lifter looks like, and as you can see, the circle pattern indicates it's spinning like it should and spreading the contact from the cam properly. Now, Mercedes-Benz did update the part number on the lifters for this engine, but it's unclear if they did anything to improve the lifters. Some people said they didn't do anything at all. Others said they improved the hydraulic section of the lifter. I'm not really sure, but if you guys know the answer to that question, comment down below and I'll add it to the description box for everybody to see. Now, something you can definitely do to improve the lifters on your M156 is replace them with the lifters out of the M159. This is the engine that was based off of the 156 and is found in the SLS, and more specifically, the SLS Black Series lifter has a special coating on it that reduces wear. If I haven't completely freaked you out about this engine yet, do not worry, we still have 3 more factory defects to cover, and we're moving right along with the camshafts. This is a dual overhead cam engine, so it has a total of 4 camshafts, which really sucks because each cam is about $700 to $800 from Mercedes-Benz, and they can fail even if you don't have a bad lifter. The camshaft is made of a softer material than the lifter, so over many miles, and especially if you don't keep up on your oil changes, the cam lobes can just wear out. Looking from up top, we have our valve cover, and the top portion underneath the valve cover has the intake camshaft, and down below has the exhaust camshaft. So as you can imagine, with gravity, more oil is going to accumulate down below on the exhaust camshaft. The intake camshaft does wear out quicker and more often than the exhaust camshaft, and I have a feeling this is because of an oiling issue, whether it's people going a little bit low on oil for an extended amount of time, or if they're just simply following the manufacturer specific oil change intervals of roughly 10,000 miles. I don't really agree with that on this particular engine. I do it more around 5,000 because the 156 uses a flat tappet design lifter, so there's no roller on the top of the lifter to help out with wear. Also, I would put a zinc additive in these engines. They've basically taken that out of modern day oil, but zinc helps with metal to metal friction areas like a cam lobe on a flat tappet lifter. There are plenty of these engines that go well over 100,000 miles with the original camshafts, so it doesn't affect all of them, and I have a feeling those are the people that are really keeping up on their oil changes. So in all fairness to Mercedes-Benz, they were sued over the issues with the camshaft and lifters, and they won. So I guess there's no real issue with the camera lifters at all. Just kidding, they probably had really good lawyers. Next, we have camshaft adjusters, and it's interesting to note that all of our factory defects are on the top portion of this engine, and that's because the bottom end of the 156 is pretty stout. It's pretty strong. You didn't see too many issues with the crank rods, pistons, or block, and they didn't have anything like, I don't know, rod bearings that needed to be replaced at a normal maintenance interval. I mean, who would do that? So we have our camshaft adjusters on this engine. There are 4 of them. They go in the front of each cam, and they can change the timing of the camshaft. This has variable valve timing. A lot of cars have these nowadays, but the M156 had some pretty big issues with these guys. Basically, they would fail, they would loosen up, and they would start to make noise like this. You would primarily hear this noise at cold start and it would go away, but if these wore out enough, they would make that noise all the time and eventually set a check engine light with timing codes. So there was a Mercedes-Benz factory bulletin covering these adjusters, but it wasn't as nice as the bulletin for the head bolts. The reason why this bulletin isn't as good as the head bolt bulletin is simply because of what Mercedes did or didn't do to improve the camshaft adjuster. The bulletin includes every year and every model car that came with this engine, indicating that maybe they never really fixed anything. In fact, we see newer cars, 2013, 2014 C63s with the M156 that are still having failing camshaft adjusters. Now, I'll leave the bulletin link down below for all of you to see, but it basically just shows you how to check if your adjusters are faulty. And as you can imagine, these things aren't cheap. They're about $700–800 a pop as well. Well, we've made it to our last major factory defect with the M156 engine, unless you guys know of any more. And if you do, please comment down below. Then we're going to be getting to why this engine is still considered to be a legend. Now, this issue Mercedes has not officially recognized. There is no official bulletin, but they have updated the part number for these parts like 4 or 5 times, which isn't always indicative of an issue, but in this case, I think it is. And I'll let you guys be the judge if whether or not seeing this video would totally freak you out if you owned a car with this engine.
All right, key on. Kill it. Ladies and gentlemen, this is why I recommend replacing M156 fuel injectors on a regular interval.
So what you saw is a stuck open fuel injector. What this can do is it can hydro lock the cylinder, it can bend or break a rod. At the very least, a leaking fuel injector like this can wash out the cylinder. So this is a pretty major issue, and there's usually not much of a warning when an injector goes out. Now, one video off the internet, that's anecdotal evidence, but in speaking with a lot of my Mercedes-Benz dealership technicians over the last few years, they've seen a slew of these coming to the dealer now that these engines have gotten a little bit older. And if you go on all of the forums, all of the groups on the internet, a lot of guys are reporting injectors that are failing and sticking open. So many people are recommending to just replace these injectors at roughly maybe 60 or 70,000 miles, especially if this is a car that you really like and want to keep for a long time. So with everything I've laid out for you guys, all of the big issues with this engine, let's go for a ride in the SL. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about why I just bought a car with this very engine and why the M156 is a total legend. Okay guys, we're going to talk performance in a minute, but let's talk about what makes the M156, hang on, oh, it sounds so good. Let's talk about what makes this thing such a legend. And I know I just spent, like 10 minutes totally bashing this engine, and if you're an M156 fanboy, I'm sure you've already commented about low numbers of failures and blah, 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 blah. But the fact of the matter is, this engine does have a bunch of different problems. They're all real problems. They didn't affect all of them. I totally get this. Every time I do a factory defect video, everyone's like, well, it was only, a small percentage. Not all of them were affected. Yes, I get it. There are cars with camshafts that, 200,000 miles, head bolts even with 150,000 miles. So I'm not saying it happens to all of them, but you add it all up, it's definitely a lot less reliable than what came out before this, and that's why a lot of us were so critical with the M156, was because the M113K was out before this. It's practically bulletproof. But anyway, an engine with a bunch of problems can still be legendary. Case in point, very similar era the LS7 and the Z06 and the Z28, they like to drop valves. Still an awesome, legendary engine, and for kind of a similar reason. So the M156 is the last naturally aspirated AMG engine ever made, ever to be produced. They went to turbocharging afterwards, and who knows what's next with electric car technology. So this is kind of like the last, you know, just big, huge, raw, all motor, you know, loves to rev high. It eats 7,000 RPM all day long, and it just never stops pulling. So this is totally the end of that. We're never going to see it again. And if you think about it, if we look back at this many decades from now, this was the most that Mercedes-Benz, that AMG, could squeeze out of atmospheric pressure. No assistance from a supercharger or a turbo. This is it. This is what human beings could do, the best they could do with an internal combustion, naturally aspirated engine from Mercedes, of course, that could still pass emissions. Obviously, there's real race engines that make more power than this, but this is it. This is it. This was the best that they could do, and it's very impressive. If you compare it to the LS7, it was a 7-liter engine in the Z06, made 505 horsepower. These started in the C63 at like 451, but like the engine in here, I'm not really exactly sure what the difference is, maybe exhaust and some tuning, but this has 518 horsepower. And then the M159, which is basically the same engine that they put forged rods and pistons. They did some with the cam and the intake. It's a dry sump, and they put it in the SLS, and the Black Series SLS has 622 horsepower, 8,000 RPM redline, all motor, guys. I mean, this is just insane, and it passes emissions and isn't in a normal road car. So that by itself kind of gives its own legendary status, even though it may not be, you know, super reliable. It's like AMG first thought, we're going to build a total all-out race engine, and then we'll worry about emissions. We're not going to ever worry about fuel economy, but we'll think about emissions later and make it work. But I mean, the flat tappet design, the design of the block, there are a lot of things on this engine that are derivative from a straight up race car engine. So, you know, I have a lot of respect for the engine itself. Obviously, I think that there are a lot of flaws with it, but again, this is all like in the top end, so I know it's expensive stuff, but it's not really like the end of the world as far as you can never fix this stuff, which is kind of segues me into why I bought a car with this engine. I want to show you guys that you can fix some of this stuff at home, and I believe they're kind of like the next really budget AMG car. The same reason I bought my E55. It was $9 grand. It was super cheap, but that, you know, it's a little older styling and whatnot. The cars that have this engine, they still look pretty modern, and this is the next kind of realm of super affordable AMG cars. So my goal for the car that I bought, first off, is to fix it. It has some issues, as you could imagine, but I want to build like a 600 horsepower naturally aspirated monster, like 7,500 RPM revving, just eating all the air in its path, just would suck up an animal if it could. These things sound insane. Probably one of the best sounding V8s ever, which also adds to its legendary status as well. So that's my goal for that car. I'm going to show you guys some things on how to fix them and stuff, kind of take away the fear that I probably just instilled in all of you, and show you that this engine can just be absolutely amazing. Something else, this was the first engine that was built from the ground up by AMG. Before, they would take an existing Mercedes-Benz engine and they would soup it up, put a supercharger on it, whatever. So they built this from the ground up. Like I said, it's the last naturally aspirated one we'll probably ever see. So it has automatic history behind it right there. And also, it's not really a 6.3 liter, it's actually a 6.2 liter, and they called it a 6.3 kind of for marketing. It's based off the M100 from the 60s. I had to look that up. I didn't know. I'm not like a Mercedes buff, but it's actually a 6.2. You guys probably already commented down below of that fact. If you compare it to the LS7 of the similar era, it's a 7 liter in the Corvette Z06. That also is the last of the naturally aspirated engines for Corvette and for GM. They went to a supercharger, but this one, even in the SL, made more horsepower, with a smaller engine. So it's squeezing a lot out of it. The technology is just crazy. The variable valve timing, although we had issues, with the adjusters and everything like that, it really made for just a very aggressive and raw engine that you could still drive on the street. So a lot of people think the newer ones kind of took away from the soul, you know, the 4-liter or the 157 that came out after this. You know, they're awesome engines, they make more power and everything like that, but you know, a lot of people think they're just quieter. They've just kind of, you know, this thing, it just wants to eat you alive. It is a total riot to drive, and again, the sound is amazing, which you guys are going to hear my car, which is like the loudest car I've ever owned. But anyway, I'm rambling. I hope you guys really enjoyed this video. I hope I didn't totally turn you off from this engine, and I hope that my new videos on the reveal, stay tuned for that, are going to kind of change your mind a little bit on what this engine can be if you know what to expect. So with that being said, hit the thumbs up button if you like this video, share the video, subscribe if you're new, and most importantly, check the bulletins down below. Don't buy one with old head bolts. And I'll see you guys all in the next video.